Hey everybody, just want to start off by saying today is obviously a very somber day in our community. I want to send out my personal heartfelt condolences, thoughts, prayers to all the victims in the senseless shooting and attack early this morning in the French Quarter. You know, it goes without saying this is senseless. It's hard to understand, and it's really hard to comprehend why these things keep happening in our country. On a personal side, you know, it's close to home with me. Number one, I was close to New York in the 9/11 attacks. I lost some personal friends, lost some high school teammates, some close family friends, and so that always. Anytime anything like this happens, that always resonates and brings back some memories of any type of terrorist attack that happens in our country. I want to say that it hits home with me personally because, I have 5 children between the ages of 17 and 26. And I could tell you early this morning, the first thing I thought of was my own son was out last night for New Year's Eve in this community. My daughter was home just last week and was down the French Quarter. This hits home. This community has welcomed me in for the last 6 years, and my family, and it's a sad day, and it's hard to express my feelings, hard to express my sentiments. I can tell you this, a couple thoughts. Here's what I know. I know that the community we live in, this city, this state, is one of the most resilient, if not the most resilient, in the entire United States. That's been proven time and time again with some things that have gone on here over the years and things that the people in this community have had to deal with. I know that they've risen before and they'll rise again and they'll support everybody. I also know this. This entire community has our entire organization behind them 100%. Our players, our coaches, our staff, and everybody with this organization is 100% here for this community. There was a lot of, this morning when the news broke and we had a team meeting, we started our meeting with a prayer and a moment of silence for the victims. I know there's a lot of information still coming out, but I just want to reiterate how much support and how much thought is coming from the New Orleans Saints. And so, again, it's something that when I pulled in this morning to the parking lot and I got the alert on my phone that it happened, the first thing I was doing was checking where my children were. And there's some people that woke up this morning and unfortunately lost loved ones that were victims of these attacks, lost sons, lost daughters, lost brothers, lost sisters. And so, certainly not a way to start the new year, but it certainly puts things in perspective. And once again, my thoughts and prayers are with all those victims and their families. With that, I'll take some questions.
Riz, how deep a dive do you take into a situation like this with the team, and how much do you try to separate, compartmentalize, and those kind of things?
Well, I think the very first thing that, myself, Mickey, and the leaders of the organization have to number one, make sure that our players and the people in our organization are safe and there's no threat to anybody at any particular point. I know there's still a lot of information that's coming in about other potential suspects and things like that. So the first thing you're thinking about is the safety of the organization and of the players and the people and everybody involved. And as I mentioned, the second thing is you're obviously thinking I have a son that's home from college and things like that are immediately think of my own personal family, and like I said, immediately want to know about their whereabouts this morning. So.
Is everyone in the organization okay? Was everyone accounted for?
As far as I know, there's been nobody from our organization that's been injured or harmed. But again, we're still early. But I haven't heard any reports of anybody from our organization that's been affected directly just yet.
And so, what time was that this morning when you found out? What time?
It was about 6 a.m. this morning when I found out about the situation. And and then, immediately start to make sure all your players are accounted for, all the people are accounted for, and, so at that point, there was still a lot of information coming in.
What was the mood at practice? And could you sense a heaviness while y'all were trying to get back to work?
Les, we talked for about 10 minutes this morning at the beginning of our team meeting, and nothing had to do with football. It all had to do with keeping things in perspective and how blessed and fortunate we all are at the start of a new year. What we do here is obviously very important to all the individuals that are here, but there's much more important things going on, around the world and right here in our community and right here at home. And so we took time to reflect it a little bit. We took time to reflect about, number one, how fortunate everybody is in the room, meaning that team meeting room this morning, with all that goes on and with all the attention that our profession brings. Sometimes we get lost in reality, and something like this pulls you back to reality. It gives you a new perspective, and so the mood in the meeting room this morning was somber. At the same time, there was a lot of messaging from some of the leaders and the older guys about, in a time like this, being a leader. We're all role models, whether we like that or not. That was one of my messages to the team. In a time like this, these guys are pillars in the community. They're leaders. The community needs us right now. They need support, and everybody's hurting. With that being said, our guys kind of, kept that in the back of their minds all day as we went through our business and we went out to the practice field. And, listen, we're out here. We're playing for the community. We're playing for the city of New Orleans. We're playing for the state of Louisiana. We're playing for our fan base. And in times like this, sometimes you can uplift people, and you can bring and shed a positive light in any way you can in a moment of disaster, because that's what this is. It's a disaster. And our guys went out there with a focus today. But, when practice is over, you're right back to reality. This is still sitting out here, and there's still a lot of stuff going on. But I thought our players handled it very professionally and very personally.
Not to open up the old wounds of about 20 plus years ago, but when something like this happens and you've already had to deal with it before, how hard is it for you personally to compartmentalize it?
Yeah, it's hard because, I literally had two high school teammates of mine. You guys have heard me say before that I played at Bergen Catholic High School in New Jersey. I had two high school teammates that were killed in Cantor Fitzgerald on, one of the companies that was wiped out by one of the airplanes in Tower 2. And, I at the time I was the head coach at the University of New Haven, and I had players. I had a lot of players from the New York City area, and I had players that lost family members, firefighters. One of my coach's friends lost his brother who was a firefighter. I mean, I went to a lot of memorials and funerals, and so anytime that something like this comes up, because you could see the smoke from the World Trade Center at my home where I lived, and so that's when I tell you that it hits home, it hits home. And so anytime something like this happens, and you hear the tag, or the phrase terrorism or mass killings, you immediately spark some memories and some thoughts. Those are always going to be with me, no matter how long I'm going to be on this earth. That stuff's always going to stay with you because, like I said, there were just multiple people that I knew very closely that were affected by that.
What's the message for team, players, coaching staff, all as you move ahead throughout the week here?
Well, I think the messaging today was going about, obviously today, going about our business with everybody in the community in mind. Keeping in mind, as I mentioned before, how fortunate we are to come in here every day and how blessed we are to do what we do, and to keep that perspective. It kind of makes the record and the results kind of disappear, to be honest with you. Now we're at a point where you feel like we're playing this last game for this community. You really do. And so the messaging, is we can just, all we can do is our part. And as we left the field, the guys will tell you, my message to them was, we're going to need to be there and support this community any way we can. Whether that's through emotional support, financial support, whatever support we can help the community with, we're going to be there for them.
What were your emotions when you found out that, your kids were safe, everyone here was safe, that you know of, but you just kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I left my house this morning and went to see if my son was home, and he wasn't. And when I sat in that parking lot at 6 o'clock this morning and found out that there was, mass casualties, the first thing I did was figure out where his location was. And fortunately for me, he was at his friend's house sleeping over. And as I said, I'm blessed and I'm lucky and I'm fortunate because there's other kids that didn't go home to their families last night. And that's just the cold, true reality of the situation. And it's like I said, it hits home because of my children. Certainly, I have 5 children, but certainly their ages and seeing some of the ages that are starting to come out, some of the victims.
With the history of how this organization has been a pillar for the community, how motivating is that for y'all to go out and, put on a good show for them and to support them in that kind of a way?
It's extremely motivating. I don't know if there's a more motivating factor that you can have than try to, uplift somebody's spirits that's going through grief. Grief and grievance is an awful thing. And we've all, in some way, shape, or form, have all gone through it in our lives. We've all lost loved ones. Everyone in here has lost a loved one. Everybody's here has dealt with tough times. And in those tough times, little nuggets of hope, of uplifting, anything you can do. I lost a brother. I lost my stepfather at too young of ages. And so in those times when you can have, anything that gives you, anything positive. And so all we can do is what we can do. And certainly it would mean a lot to myself, the team, the whole organization to be able to do that for the community.
You also mentioned kind of the resiliency the statement does as well. Like, what do you expect, just not from your players, but from the city itself on how to respond to something like this?
Yeah, Matt, 6 years ago when I moved here, you hear all the stories and you see everything on TV, but until you live here, and until you walk the streets, and until you live in the communities, and until you meet the people, and until you, the 2 things I heard about when I moved here, if I asked everybody that I asked about moving here, no matter what they said, they all had 2 things to say. Number one, the food, right? But the second one was always the people. The people, the people. And it's the resiliency of the people, it's the attitude of the people, and it's the community involvement here that I think makes the people in this area what they are. And obviously Katrina, obviously there's just been so many things that have happened here, natural disasters, tornadoes, floods, hurricanes that this area's had to deal with, and always come back and always find a way to make it through. And this is going to be a tough time, but I'm positive that the community is going to do the same thing in this instance as well.
Correctly, when DeMar Hamlin had his on-field incident, there was like grief counselors made available to players and things like that. Is that something that happens during a week like this?
Yeah, we have our own personal, situation here that our players have available to them, and so does the NFL. Also has a league-wide, but we do have in-house, assistance for anybody dealing with that on any level. Yes.
Understanding the awkward transition to football, but we didn't see Derek. Is there an update on that?
Yeah, it is kind of a tough transition. I'm going to agree with that, but I know that we've got to cover some of these things. So as far as the injury report goes today, Derek, we're going to try to, as I mentioned to you guys the other day, with the functionality of the hand, we're going to at some point this week, whether that's tomorrow, Friday, try to see if we can replicate what the game's going to be like for him and see where he's at. And listen, Alvin's really in no different situation than he was the other day. He's in here this morning for 3 hours working his butt off to try to rehab and get himself back. So I'm going to leave that window open for both those guys for as long as possible, because those guys have been just working their butts off on the rehab process, and I think I'm going to respect their wishes until we figure out that they can't do it. Kendre is still in the concussion protocol, so he didn't practice today. Peyton Turner's dealing with an ankle, and Pete Werner is also in the concussion protocol. Both those guys hopefully will get past the next step, and hopefully we'll be doing something tomorrow. And the rest of the people on here, we're limited in some form or fashion.
With Derek, I thought you said Monday y'all are going to try to do that earlier in the week, so why wait till later in the week to try to...
It's because of where he is with his rehab.
Okay, so does that mean there was like, it's just not progressing as quick as you thought it might?
I'm following the lead of the medical side. It's just where he is in the rehab. It's better off waiting in layman's terms, it's easy. It's better if you get the hand as strong as possible before you do that to see if he's going to be able to function.
So he hasn't had like another simulated.
He's just had the one.
Any concern at all when it comes to Derek with conditioning or anything like that, or is that something he's still been able to work on?
Yeah, in his rehab, he's able to condition and all that, and so I think we're good there. It's just obviously just a hand, so he's able to do cardio and things like that. So, and obviously mentally, he's a very very bright, strong mental guy. So I'm not worried about the mental side of it. He's got a high football IQ. So, like I said, I'm going to leave that door open as long as we can because those guys, like I said, have been really just working their tail off on their rehab. And so I said this before and I'll say it again. It's not going to be a situation if we feel whatsoever that either one of those guys could either worsen their situation or we're going to put them in harm's way. We're not going to throw them out there just to throw them out there. We're just not going to play them just to play them. We're going to make sure that they can function at a high level and they can do what they need to do to function in the game.
Or I imagine still open for Chris Olave as a potential return as well.
Listen, Chris had a great practice today. I don't know, him and I are joking around on the side, and he's just want to see him get through, maybe 3 or 4 days in a row. But heck, he had a really great day today. So we'll leave that door open as well. That's a little different situation, obviously, because we're dealing with coming back off of multiple concussions. But he certainly had a great day today.
Beyond the motivation to try and win every game you play, is it enhanced when you know other teams' futures are hinging on the game you're going to play on Sunday?
Yeah, I mentioned, I think this the other day, is I'm actually glad that these guys are playing for something, meaning the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because, I want to finish with a challenge for this football team. We haven't played well the last couple of weeks, needless to say, and so I think the challenge is out there for us to respond to that. There's a lot of guys that want to go out and have a really good performance for their last, game of the year. And so, sometimes when you're playing a team that there's really not playing for anything, then sometimes it's just not as competitive maybe as it could be. And so I'm glad. Me personally, we love a challenge around here, and nobody likes a challenge more than me. So there's a little extra motivation there as well. That they're playing to get into the playoffs.
Did something happen with Pete Werner?
With Pete, he's in the concussion protocol.
He leave the game early?
So he had Pete had.
Did he leave the game early?
He did not leave the game early. He started feeling concussion symptoms after the game, and so he's in the concussion protocol. He's passed the first step. As long as he has no setbacks, he'll be back in some form of practice tomorrow. But he just had some concussion symptoms post game. He did not leave the game. He did not have an injury during the game. It was a post game situation.
How often does that happen? Is that something that kind of comes up and guys got to get looked at after the game?
Yeah, it's happened. There's been guys in my career. There's been guys that come in the next day, go to bed, wake up with some symptoms. There's guys that maybe 2 hours later start to feel it, and so I've seen that before. It's not uncommon. It's actually probably more common than you think. A lot of these guys that go into the concussion protocol, you'd probably be a little bit surprised if you look back at when they got injured. A lot of them don't, have any symptoms until post game.
Just to bookend it, we talked about Derek earlier and how y'all prayed when y'all first got in, but I guess how helpful is it during this time when you have leaders who are also spiritual like Derek and DeMario to help the team in a situation like this?
Those are the first two guys that would come to mind for me as well. DeMario is as good of a leader as I've ever been around, and then you factor in his spirituality. He's a motivator. Just as a human being, and then, he's obviously a man of the Lord. He's very, very devoted in that area, and so to have guys, younger players in our locker room that can look up to somebody like that, especially people that are men of faith, and we have voluntary chapels, probably here more than you think. There's a few days a week where guys are in here, and obviously DeMario and Derek are a huge part of that. But those would be the first two guys that come to mind. So especially to have some of the younger guys, we talked about therapy. Hey, sometimes your therapy can come from your teammates if you can lean on a man of faith in a time like this, that's for sure.
Just checking, it would be Rattler. Again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.